of AI for LAM, AI for Libraries, Archives and Museums. And today we have some speakers from ACMI, the Australian Centre of Moving Image, and the State Library of Queensland joining us to talk about their collaboration. But I would very much like to welcome those who are joining us from the Australian side of the Tasman Sea and invite you to share where you're joining us. Oh, lovely, Sarah from Kaurna Country, to share with us where you're calling in from today. Just to let you know that we are preparing more webinars for the year. And I think I'll hand over to you, Rowan, to do a welcome from the other side of the Tasman Sea.
Tēnā koutou katoa, it's Rowan Payne. Welcome everyone. I'm a co-convener of the Australia-New Zealand chapter, along with Ingrid from the New Zealand Aotearoa side of things. I'd just like to do a welcome to everyone. Kia koutou ngā munga, ngā awa, ngā waka, ngā tupuna o Aotearoa me te whenua moemoe a e hui hui mai nei. Tēnā koutou katoa. To you, the mountains, rivers, waka, ancestors of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the land of the dreaming, Australia, and to those further afield that are gathered here, greetings to you all. So yes, welcome on behalf of the Australia-New Zealand chapter of AI for LAM. I'd just like to point out that the session has been recorded and we'll post it online on our YouTube channel a bit later. I'd like to invite everyone again to use the chat function to introduce themselves and they're interested in the topic of today's discussion and any questions, and we'll try and get those questions to the speakers. I think, Ingrid, I hand over to Francesco, our host for today.
Please do. Just before you do, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we meet upon today here in Australia and pay my respects to elders past and present, and with admiration look to the leaders of the future. Over to you, Rowan, to introduce Francesco.
Great. Yes. I would like to welcome Francesco, our host for today, who will introduce our two speakers more fulsomely. Francesco is Cloud Services and Software Manager, Development Manager at ACMI, and he oversees software development and infrastructure operations. In 2023, he presented at the Fantastic Futures Conference, which is the AI for LAM annual conference, the one in Vancouver, on using machine learning tools to enhance the discovery and access of ACMI video collections. Thank you, Francesco.
Thank you everyone. Yes, today we are going to talk with a couple of guests about the project that saw the State Library in Queensland and the ACMI, the Screen Museum in Melbourne, the Museum of Screen Culture in Melbourne, to collaborate together for building an application, an AI augmented application for accessing video collection at the Queensland Library. Our guests are Jeff Williams, who is the head of technology at ACMI. Jeff has got a lot of experience in technology applied to museums and galleries, particularly in the US, where he's originally come from. He's an actually NASA software engineer. Wow. And is a leader for AI, all the AI initiatives at ACMI. And Margaret Warren is the Director of Content Management at the State Library of Queensland, and she oversees all the acquisition, descriptions, access and preservation of physical and digital collections. So I would start with, I wasn't actually involved at all in this project, because at the time I was enjoying my long service leave and having a long holiday overseas, visiting my family in Italy. So I was involved very, very little. And I'm curious to know, particularly from Margaret, how everything started. Okay, what was the initial idea? Why you decided from Brisbane to involve ACMI in Melbourne, a museum, which is a museum, definitely not a library, and tell us a little bit of the background of this initiative.
Sure. So I guess part of the remit of my role is I look after the teams to do with discovery and access of collections, and so we have long been aware that some of our historic film collections, which have been digitised, have limited provenance, limited information about them, and we were posing a question to ourselves about how could we potentially increase understanding what's in those collections, and really interested in doing some experiments with AI to help us in that work. One of the things that happens each year at State Library is we have a crowdfunding event where 3 teams across the library do a pitch for a project, and the attendees pay a certain amount of money, and after the 3 pitches they all do a vote, and the winning pitch is the one that gets the money. And so we did a pitch to our this is done through our foundation. We did a pitch around this idea of using AI technologies to help increase discovery and understanding of our digital film collections, and it was the one that got up. So that was really exciting. So you get the money and then you think, gosh, we now have to do this. And we realised that we didn't have the skills or capacity internally to do this work. So then our next question was, well, how could we get this done, what we wanted to do? And so we had a bit of a look around and did a bit of environmental scanning about what else was happening in Australia in the sort of the space of using AI to look at digital collections. And we came across the work that ACMI had been doing with their film collections. And it was actually as simple as an email to Seb Chan and a conversation. And that's how it sort of all came about. So it was really just about having a conversation and saying, look, we've got this idea, we have some money. Would it be possible for us to work together?
And this is not the first AI initiative that you have done, or AI work that you have done at the library, right, Margaret?
No. We also in 2024 we did a project that I can't remember where the funding for that one came from, but we did get some funding for that one as well, where we're really wanting to investigate ways to build engagement rather than discovery. It was engagement with our First World War collections. State Libraries has responsibility for galleries that are in our Anzac Square, so similar to the memorials that are in the different states. There's an Anzac memorial, and then there are some galleries that are actually underground. So they're completely digital collections there because it's not an indemnified gallery space. But we had, over the World War I commemorative period, we did a huge amount of digitisation of First World War diaries, letters and archives. And I actually can't believe it. And Ingrid, you would also remember going to the State Library of New South Wales in 2015, 10 years ago, actually, because it came up on my Facebook memories, and looking at how we could collaborate as cultural institutions on the commemoration of World War I. But anyway, over that commemorative period, we did a lot of digitisation of those First World War collections. And what we wanted to explore was, with our schools engagement team, was the idea of a virtual veteran who would be able to answer particularly school students' questions about the experiences of Queenslanders in World War I. So we partnered with an organisation that had expertise in the creation of chatbots, and one of the criteria we wanted to have with that was that the model that was used to answer the questions was one that that we were able to seed with the content that came from our collections. We also, so all of those digitised, that digitised content which had been, transcribed and made available, was one of the components of it. Plus, we also used the Trove API and used all newspaper articles from Queensland for that 1915. I think we took it up to 1920. And then we also approached the Australian War Memorial and received permission for them to use C.W. Bean's definitive First World War histories, which is a 30-volume work. So we had this really rich data set that was then used to create the chatbot, whose name was Charlie. And so students could then ask questions about World War I and the experiences of World War I. The answer would come back from the chatbot, but it also has it also then provided, as part of the answer, links to the source material so that anyone who received the answer can either the newspaper article, what came from World War histories, or what came from our collections to understand how that answer was derived. So we'd had some experience with experimenting with AI and collections. And so I guess that was something that gave us a bit more confidence to know that we could collaborate with other institutions, either for doing some of the work or helping us with the data.
Thanks, Margaret. So, Jeff, this wasn't a chatbot, was quite different from a chatbot. Can you tell us what actually was created and built for enhancing the access to the video collection of the library?
Sure, and I can show everybody. We've got a quick demonstration here, but really, I think most of you are going to be familiar with the concept, but we basically built a website and a database, no vector database for this tool, just a database to store the results in a 2-page Flask website to doing the service. Now, ACMI had already built kind of a tool for our own collection, so we're able to reuse that code. It's all in GitHub, and so it was quite easy and quite quick to spin up the site. And what that really allowed us to do is focus on doing the data processing. We ended up doing about 6,000 minutes of data processing on footage where GPU ports, everything was run on-prem, but we ran each of those also 6,000 minutes through 5 different AI tools, giving us different ways of analyzing this, looking at basically look at video transcription, audio transcription, video description, and audio description as well. So we can take a quick look at that here. Not sure if the video is playing, but sorry, there we go. All right, so you can see here that you basically just go type koala. You can choose from the different types of search that you want, and it gives you all of the videos that we processed that have koalas in it, and you can also see in the highlighted text below where the words match. You can click on any of these links and it takes you to the exact point of the video. Here's one of my favorites, the koala riding the dog. Didn't know that was a thing until we did the search. So yeah, so you have all the spots in here. Everything is cached. Everything is stored in a Postgre database. This is a standalone app, but we have all the JSON and XML so that at some point, if we wanted to integrate it into any other way that we could. Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward tool, very powerful. You can see the different abilities to kind of search through audio transcription and audio description as well. The majority of the work was really in the processing. 447 videos were processed. And one of the things, since we were able to reuse code, we were able to do kind of maximize that. I think the original conversation that we had with Margaret and the team was to do about 50 of these, but we were able to say, let's beef that up and try to get more videos so we can have more information to look at. Yeah, so it took 34 days of processing, 832 hours, pretty much pegged CPU. We did video processing, we did Blip2, Video May, Yellow 8, and Google Vit. We had, like I said, we had already had the tools to build all this. We just updated some of the models to make them a little bit more recent. For audio processing, we did Whisper and we did Clap. And you quickly went from having like no metadata on these videos to having a ton. I think just one of the passes alone gave us 460,000 meta tags to describe these 400 some videos. Here are some of the most popular ones. This is just from the video description. And these are the most popular ones. Obviously, it gets a lot more interesting when you start looking at the ones that occur the least: toothbrushes, pineapples, headbands, unicycles, and everything is was pretty happy with the results. There are some anomalies, like this is not a toothbrush, but I think that's probably due to the underlying data sets not having a lot of images of children smoking pipes, and that's probably for good reason. Yeah, so basically the video process is really simple. We were given the videos, we ingested them out of the database and just kind of processed them through all of those. It was really exciting to see a tool that ACMI had built, how easily it was able to be deployed, really leveraging all the code reuse. And really the only kind of the hardest thing I think probably was actually choosing which videos and delivering those videos. But the modern AI tools are typically pretty, I found them that they're pretty good at having low barriers once you've chosen that, once the tool's been built, once you've chosen the videos to process. Like we'd had no data transformation that was needed. We needed no information really about the videos itself. We did no fine tuning, no retrieval augmented generation on this. We didn't do any we just really basic prompt engineering, which is something that I found is really useful because that helps us kind of see a lot of the just like the raw results before we start trying to figure out ways to kind of make them more accurate.
There is a question if the tool is already open to public access, but I don't think so, right, at the moment?
No, not at the moment. I mean, that's yeah, I guess that's for our thinking. That's our sort of what next thinking, and I think that probably highlights one of the differences between ACMI's sort of use of it, in that their discovery layer for finding film, this is incorporated into it, whereas our sort of library discovery layer doesn't really have the capacity to be able to integrate those results into it. So currently it's just sitting as a staff-only tool, but we're really thinking hard about what to do next with it. But I couldn't say we've come to any decision yet.
So Margaret, following up this one, do you think there are particular challenges in collaborating with another institutions for AI augmented applications? If there is some extra effort that needs to be done internally, externally, with stakeholders, and when you collaborate on AI projects?
I think rather than challenges, I think it's just acknowledging that there might be differences in the institution's approaches to what the outcomes are. But if you're holding, I think we talked the other day, the idea of holding the collections lightly and being clear in the conversations about what you'd like to see as an outcome. And it isn't necessarily about the delivering of a product. It can quite often be about the learning of something new. So in the example with the virtual veteran, that actually had a product outcome, and so I suppose we were collaborating with a vendor for that one, but there was lots of going back and forth. One of the examples was that as it was being developed, we had these conversations about tone of the chatbot, given the content. And obviously most of these chatbots are often developed in a sort of a sales context, certainly outside of the cultural sector, and it was a bit too jolly sort of almost jingoistic in its language, and so we did some work in that space. When in the collaboration with ACMI, I think it was we knew that what we were doing was sort of, we knew there was a proof of concept because ACMI had already done that. But for us, it was more an experimentation, an answering of some questions about, does this actually help us both internally and for our clients to increase discovery and access to content. So I think that's probably important because, and I think Jeff, I'd ask Jeff to talk a little bit more about this. We know with AI pieces of work, sometimes the outcomes might be unpredictable. And so going into it, that with knowing that at the start really helps then you manage expectations of both organisations. I don't know, do you want to talk a bit further about that, Jeff?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you talked about Charlie earlier, but Charlie kind of almost made your organization come to terms with that, right? And you had also built the tool before, and you understood that. So you organizationally, you guys had a high maturity with understanding kind of the risks and also kind of some of the capabilities. And I think going back to the whether or not we release this or is publicly available, I think early on, like one of the thoughts were we would make this publicly available, but since this is really kind of meant to be more of a technology demonstration, really understand, evaluate what the capabilities of it, one of the big differences between what's on the ACMI website and this tool is you can drill down and see all of the raw data. Right. So on the ACMI side, we allow people to search for them, but we don't actually show them all of the raw data. So you couldn't kind of troll, say, the search and look at the logs and find out where it found stuff that might have been wrong, and exploit that. So that's and that's because we kind of obscure that stuff. But since we were using this really for research purposes, we wanted to show all of that. So I think that was kind of one of the trade-offs was like, well, let's have it closed, but let's show it, like let all staff that see it view all of the data, which is really helpful. And one of the things that was really key to the collaboration, and I've got it actually pulled up, I can share this here. The first time you emailed us, Margaret, you really clearly said what the problems you were trying to solve were. And that's really powerful, right? Like you had thought through it. This was really helpful in keeping us grounded, because even though it was an experiment, like having this written down and as a reference point, so that any time that we can reference it is super helpful. And you even went even further and also kind of outlined a couple of the three main questions that you were trying to answer. So approaching the collaboration and the experiments with that in mind of what we were trying to solve made it quite simple for ACMI and our team to make sure that our tools met those before we started the project, and then also kind of stay grounded as we made decisions throughout the project.
So what's your evaluation of the output, Jeff? It's been successful or partially successful? You can see margins for improvements.
I'd say it's successful. Definitely successful. So if you look at it compared to the three questions that we've got here, right? We were able to do two of these. We were able to do the last two. Can we scan time-coded summary for a film and quickly get the content we want? We already had that built in our tools. We had could machine learning and other AI technologies support this work in meaningful ways. I guess meaningful is the catch there, but we could certainly AI and machine learning could certainly help you find the videos. This top one, we have a pathway for that, and we could easily build that, but we decided that the focus really, rather than trying to modify our tools to use some embeddings to allow this to happen, that we focus on kind of the quantum and doing as many videos as we can. I mentioned the sheer amounts of data that was created just by a single pass. Looking at all of that, there's some really interesting things with the repeatability. So the algorithm was one which we would take basically a still of a video every 100 frames, which is about 3 seconds. So what that allowed us to do is that sometimes when there was a screen up for a significant period of time, say 15 seconds, what would happen is that one screen would be processed 4 different times. And then we're also processing it by like 5 different models. So you have we could really see the differences across each of those models and each of those passes, and the inconsistency in how things would change. One of my favorites is a sign that was originally classified as a no trespassing sign. The second time, it was classified as a kangaroo sanctuary sign, and the third time, it was classified as a sign, a sanctuary at Kangaroo Island. Now, interestingly enough, like, it was a sign, it was about a sanctuary. Now, the words were obscured by a shadow. But if you actually read the sign, there was actually no mention of kangaroo anywhere. It was actually a koalas, and it was actually Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary. But like I said, we did not do any of the kind of the modern techniques to really try to make this to get as accurate as results as possible, because we wanted to look at kind of the raw the raw sign bias, if you will, in the sign, like wanting to make signs. My favorite is the first one, which is a no trespassing sign, where obviously there's just a lot of metadata about signs that look like this, probably in America, that say no trespassing. The multiple passes was really interesting, and caching that, and since it's all cached, you can look back at it and evaluate it, right? So real-time AI tools, which this is happening, and it's different every time, is much harder. This also gives us looking at it across the different models. And I was really hoping that when you saw, say, the koala sign misclassified as a kangaroo sign, that one of the other models that we passed through would catch it and help us. But honestly, the models kind of consistently struggled on the same items. And so, you know, I showed a picture of the baby smoking or playing with the pipe. None of the models actually got that right. They were all, some of the models tried to describe it as a stethoscope, toothbrush. So, you know, when they all consistently got the hard stuff or the non-common stuff wrong. But yeah, so it was so there was a decent amount of presentation and kind of evaluation on this stuff, and I think the outcomes are kind of what we all expect at this point.
Do you feel that there is this possibility of improvements, potential improvements, to get basically from, I don't know, I'm happy 90% of the cases of the videos, I'm happy with that, but I would like basically to get to 100%. Do we have the capability with AI today, okay, to do this kind, to get to the 99.99% if we want?
I mean, you're going to spend a lot of time to get those last couple nines, right? I think you can get right now to the 95% pretty easily. Like I said, I felt like we were at the 80% here, no prompt engineering, no context provided, right? I mean, the real basic is we could have provided the context of Queensland. Like, these are all Queensland videos. They're in the fact that they are in the library's archive, right? That's huge context. We didn't pass that. But that's going to help solve things that go to South Australia and Kangaroo Island. It's going to hopefully pull that back into Queensland and put that in Queensland. I mean, we also had some misclassifications with pineapples going into being classified as being in Hawaii. Apparently, Queensland and Hawaii look a lot alike. But the context of being from Queensland, just in the archive, would really help with that. So I think there's some really basic things that you could get to the 90s. And then, to me, I think if you really wanted to get to the 5 nines, that's just going to be, you're going to have to really, really know the videos at that point, so you can really do the prompt engineering and any kind of fine tuning. So it would probably be multiple passes, where you're doing one pass, looking at what's wrong, adjusting your fine tuning, and going through that cycle until you get it to be 100%. And now, since this is all cached, you could actually do that. It would just take a lot of time. But out of the box, the tool.
Margaret,
I'm interested in just sort of because I think there's a sort of a in a sense, there's a philosophical conversation around this. I was at I don't know whether it was last year or the year before. My memory has gone. I was at the Collections as Data Summit. The Vancouver Statement on Collections as Data was part of that fantastic 3 or 4 day event, which really moved that conversation on from the Santa Barbara work that had happened a few years earlier. And we had a really robust conversation around one of the table groups that I was in around HTR, which is the automated transcript using it's a different sort of AI technology for transcribing 19th century handwriting in digitized documents, which of course sort of OCR has been around for a long time, HTR less so, but incredibly powerful for increasing access, but also increasing the ability for people to work with these collections at scale if the transcription is automated. And so we've done some early work on that with the 19th century handwriting collection that had been digitized from microfilm. So not very good quality, very messy hands, almost impenetrable in some cases. And we got a between 70 and 80% success rate on the first pass. So this is several years ago. And we had a really robust discussion around the table, whereas for us, I thought that is pretty awesome to get from nothing to 70%. That is really going to be helpful for researchers who want to try and find their way into this collection. And there were other people around the table who said, well, I wouldn't accept anything other than 99%. And so they were saying that they would put a lot of human endeavour into that next step. But there was also a conversation around if you're running things through models over and over again, that you might actually get to the point of diminishing return on the investment, both in terms of the time, the resourcing, the power required to do it, and actually what the outcomes are. And so that's been a really interesting discussion with us with this particular collection, where we've actually been what I call the insertion of humans into the loop, where we've been having some volunteers who have been going through and doing some correction and normalisation work with those collections. So I do think when we look at particularly the energy requirements of AI, where there might be a point where we could go ahead and get to 100%. Is that something we want to do, or is that something we're prepared to live with sort of, not 100%? So I'm super interested in what people feel, and because I think it's something that's about feelings as well as the time and energy and effort that's required to do it.
And Margaret, at ACMI, that's certainly our thoughts. So the 80% is better than zero. That's kind of what we say that a lot. We recognize that it's not correct, but we also we have evaluated it. It's like, and we feel like the chances and the likelihood of risk of harm in that 20% being incorrect is low. So that is something that we have evaluated. We do understand is an organizational risk in that some of the data might be wrong, and that could lead to harm. But we feel like that's a low risk, and it's worth the. I'm not saying harm is worth the 80%. I think the harm is a pretty extreme case, hopefully with this type of tool. But it's at 80% or the 70%, it allows access and allows that entry point into it, that you can then have the human in the loop. You can then kind of refine things if you want to.
Yeah, I even I think that sort of the assumption that if a human looks at it, that's going to be 100% correct is actually something we need to test. That assumption, humans can't necessarily correct 19th century handwriting, to use that example, with 100% accuracy, given what might be their technical challenges or the inability to read it. So we shouldn't, I think, make an assumption that a human's going to get it 100% right and a machine will never get it right. So I think we are already in that space where we know we do our best and we manage the risks around that.
But once again, that's another great example of like the handwriting thing is organizationally, the library was already ready for this project because you've done those things and you realize that 70% is better than zero. So the conversations about 100% accuracy with AI tools has already been had with some of these other cognitive services, machine learning tools.
Yeah.
And then as a follow-up questions perfectly from Rowan coming. Are your two organizations some risk management guidelines for AI applications? And those risk management guidelines policies are aligned between the two organizations can be a problem in collaborating with AI projects? Margaret.
At State Library, we've done, and obviously, you know, particularly with generative AI, there is a lot of, you know, there's a lot of conversation at all levels of government too around it. And as a government-funded institution, we had to think about those things. Around, I think it's I can't tell you, it's within the last 12 months, we developed a set of sort of use of generative AI principles that we run and that was signed off by our executive team. And that's sort of just a set of principles and questions we need to think about if we're considering the use of generative AI. And one of those principles is being open with whomever we are doing this work for the fact that it is using generative AI and what are the parameters around that. So that's been really helpful because it does give, even though it's a principle-based tool, it does give some language to help you make decisions about what the risk is and how you're going to mitigate those risks and what might be the way to go forward or not, depending on what the product is. And so most recently, so in the library sector and particularly in the higher ed sector, many libraries use the Ex Libris Primo as the library catalogue, and only, you know, in November last year, and State Library went live a couple of weeks ago with a generative AI research tool that is pulling answers to natural language questions from the subscription databases that the library subscribes to provide a sort of a synthesized response to a natural language question with links to sort of five articles from those databases that have been used to create that answer, and then actually making what the search strategy was available for a researcher to look at. So all of this is to say that we used our internal set of principles around the use of generative AI to ask the questions: will we go live with this? You know, is this something that we want to dip our toe in? And then how will we talk about it with our staff, and how will we talk about it with our library patrons so they're aware of what is going on? So I think in terms of us managing our risks, we've got sort of a framework that we're now using. And you know, and going back, that wasn't in place when we were doing Charlie, the World War I veteran, but it would have been really helpful. And that was probably one of the trigger events for us to say, okay, we need to think about what might be the principles that we would apply as an organisation before we do this moving forward. I don't think the differing risk appetites between organisations was a particular concern that we honed in on. Although, depending on, because I feel like this was a low risk piece of work, but it could be something that you'd need to have a conversation about if there was the potential for reputational risk that came out of any outcomes.
But Margaret, the library's approach to risk with this is very similar to ACMI's, right? It's more of a guidelines framework kind of related principles based rather than policy. And that's because of the rapid change and speed in which all these things are developing. And I think this is also a good opportunity to talk about like the deliverables for this project. It was not just the building the tool, right? I also came and delivered the work to two different teams, and then I also met with the senior leadership team, and we talked about AI and risk and how ACMI is working on training and some of these things as well. So there was a lot of information sharing, even at the risk level, and stuff as well, which I thought was a great outcome as well.
Yeah, and that's we shouldn't minimize the benefit of having, you know, Jeff come and spend, you know, he spent an entire day with us, meeting different groups of people and presenting to all of our staff, and it's been really good for at the senior leadership team level, building our understanding of both the applications and how you can apply a sort of a, you know, managing risks, but also looking for opportunities, because if we only sort of look at it through the lens of managing risks, there is actually the risk that we won't do things. But we also need to look at opportunities and how we talk about that through this is providing us a unique opportunity, which it absolutely did for us. and then also the raising awareness of staff through the other presentations.
And you also invited other organizations to some of the presentations, which I thought was really, really, really smart too. So I respect that. That was great.
Have you found during the duration of the project, or even before, when just at the concept stage, any skepticism, reluctance in your organizations, and people saying, oh, well, I'm not really sure if we should actually invest resources, money in this kind of things. Let's basically stay out of AI. It happens all the time, these kind of reactions. And how, if there was any kind of reactions like that, how did you manage that? I think this is this is a question very important for our audience, for all the other organizations, because sometimes you have a manager or director or an executive saying, well, I'm not really convinced, and that blocks everything and then delays everything and says, oh, okay, it's not worth it.
Jeff, why don't you go first?
Yeah.
And talk about where you are.
Yeah, the first question was just about staff, and yes, I mean there's even at ACMI, where we're technology focused, museum. Our CEO comes from a technology background, was a former CTO effectively, and we deal largely with digital formats, and our remit includes video games, social media, and films. Right, even internally, there's a whole lot of questioning and debate and discussions about whether or not even the tools that we've already built, we should have built. So there's lots of interrogating and investigating, and I think that's really important because we're all like learning through experimentation. I mean, this was the product that we released originally that Margaret was able to discover and solve. This was a experiment as well. So all of these are experiments, and we're all learning. And I think organizationally, ACMI is working on developing our kind of AI stance right now, and having that being a very public document that we can publish to people, because there's more and more questions about why ACMI, even from our stakeholders, not just internally, why we're dealing with AI. So it's something that organizations need to spend a lot of time and think through.
And I think it's sort of in our context, I mean, I had a fairly, opportunity focused approach to this, whilst trying to understand what might be risks involved. I read and I think using other people's research and test cases and use cases is a really helpful way to build a business case to do something, and also framing it effectively. So I think in our context, it's one of the big conversations is, when a cataloger describes a film collection, for example, they're going to be applying layers and layers of context around the provenance, when it was created, what we might know about it from the acquisition or from the donor, that gives a richness that you can't actually get. You're not going to get the context from the sort of work that was being done there, but you are going to be able to get ways to discover things. So to have that wrestling with these ideas that are about improving, from our perspective, improving discovery of content is really interesting. And I think the idea of sort of owning that we're doing this for the purposes that we're doing, and really clear about, well, this is why we've got our toe in this space, and we wanted to own that, and we want to iterate, and we want to grow. I think if we, certainly in the library context, if we had sat on the sidelines when the internet first came in, and there was a whole lot of existential angst in libraries about, well, now the internet is here, no one's going to ever want to come to the library again. Google will give you all the answers. There was a lot of, existential hand-wringing. If we'd sat on the sidelines and thought, well, okay, let's just see how this plays out before we do anything, I believe we would have become irrelevant, and we wouldn't have been able to seize many of the opportunities that came about through the sort of the digital age. And as someone who's worked in the profession since before the internet, that would have been a really sad loss to us. So I think there is that. I feel like this is a set of technologies that, you know, are disruptive in a really similar way to, you know, in our context anyway, to what I mean, the implementation of the search engine, for example. And so I think making a business case that really, you know, really talks about without wanting to go into it with totally rose-colored glasses, but to look at it as an opportunity to learn and collaborate, and not about being attracted to the next shiny thing, I think is the way that you build a really good case to do things in an experimental way. And I mean, we would have, you know, the same sorts of, you know, there's maybe disquiet or concern, or I'm not really sure about this, and is this going to add value? But I think they're incredibly valuable questions to be asking about anything that we do, or any new service improvement, whether it's a technological one or whether it's you know, some sort of other service improvement. Let's ask those questions and grapple with the answers as we move forward.
And Margaret, at ACMI, one of the things that we say is, you know, AI is not the thing, emerging technologies is the thing. Right?
Yeah.
We gave a very similar kind of approach to Web3, right?
Yeah.
Now we didn't see, it didn't help us solve some of the longstanding problems and things we were already trying to solve. So AI was much easier to adopt. But I think also like being really conscious about why you're developing these tools and who they're for and what those audiences are is very, very important. And to not get too swept up in building it for the sake of building it.
Yeah, I'd concur with that. Yeah, and in fact, in this context, with the work that we did together, I actually think the collaboration was at least as valuable as the outputs. So what we learnt together was really fantastic.
Agreed.
Inviting everyone to post questions in the chat. We are going to the last 10 minutes of our webinar. And in the meantime, I'm just curious, Jeff and Margaret, particularly probably Jeff, there is the perception that building AI prototypes or doing AI experimentation is quite expensive because it requires GPU, the access to GPU requires people with high specialized skills. What it is it true that actually it's an expensive exercise, and can we afford, in the GLAM sector, can we afford to run this expensive exercise?
I mean, it took us 34 days to do this processing. Now we are GPU poor. We have none. So we ran this on CPU. We basically took an old virtual host, an old server that had 64 cores, and we dedicated all 64 cores at that and just gave it time. A GPU would have saved us, would have allowed us to do this work in about 2.5 days instead of 34 days, and probably cost us $9,000. So that's, you know, so there, you can do it without GPUs if you've got time, and caching it is a way to do that. You know, so I guess my thing is, don't let those things be a blocker, right? There are lots of ways that you can do it, and I think, and we've ACMI has explored a couple of those, and we post about those on our blog as well. So I guess that's my encouragement. Just don't let the fact that you don't have a GPU restrict your opportunities to experiment.
There is a question just popped up from Annette. This may probably, is ACMI looking for other GLAM partners to support access to the digitized film video collections?
Yeah. We're always looking for partners and collaborators, and were really keen on this type of stuff, because it's like this was a lovely project, because there is, just because of how much both organizations learned. It really helps us kind of, I don't know, I think when you see the results in someone else's collection, because I would argue that we all have kind of different relationships with our collection, and we look at them in particular ways. A lot of us have spent many years with those collections. So having like a fresh perspective and looking at things and kind of unobjectively looking at the results is really powerful. Also, kind of seeing like how, in this case, how easy it was, really. I mean, the only thing the hardest thing was getting the videos. That was the hardest thing with this project. So that was really actually powerful, and being like, okay, so these tools that we're making open source are actually quite easy for other people to use if you've got some of the technology schools and can download stuff and install it off of GitHub. So yeah, so we're definitely looking at all different ways that we can help other organizations, because it helps us and it just helps the sector. And we think that these we're just really interested in kind of seeing how these tools develop over the next few years.
You can see Rowan raising his hands.
There's one more question there from.
I was just
Yeah.
clapping it. I was just clapping, actually.
Ah, okay. So
There's one
Yeah,
more
there is-
question there from Ian
Ian.
Song.
Yeah. So I think that's a question for you, Margaret. Do you think
Yeah.
the library itself has enough AI expertise in carrying out the AI related projects, or seeing help from external project partners?
I think one of the things we will need to do is to increase our capacity for doing AI work ourselves. However, it always is something that you need to look at if it isn't a core thing as yet. Is that something that it's better to work in partnership? But I think one of the things Jeff spoke to our senior leadership team was about their AI ambassadors program, which was really about improving understanding of AI across the organisation. And I think as a first step, that's probably more important than actually sort of recruiting specific skills, noting that it isn't at this stage a core part of our work. So I think there's a real balance there. But obviously, we look at the skill sets, and obviously having worked in the metadata space, with the cataloguers in one of my teams, we've been intentionally over the last 5 years recruiting different skill sets into our metadata team. We don't call them catalogers anymore. They're metadata. It's our metadata team, and we're looking for different skill sets with metadata and the ability to be really digitally capable in manipulating data, using bulk methods for changing tools, and really a whole, like a different skill set to what we would have recruited for a cataloger 15 years ago. And so I think that's something that might happen with AI as well. It's not necessarily you have those specific skills, but you're looking at people who've got high levels of digital literacy, high levels of digital capability, and also that thing that you can't have a skill set for, which is that insatiable curiosity to learn how to do things better, and to think about how we can do this more effectively or more efficiently, and is there a technology that might be able to help us to do it? So it's more a way of thinking than necessarily a particularly defined set of skills.
And one thing to expand on it, I think probably most of us on the call are already saying this, but like these tools that we're building right now are going to be integrated into every collection management system, and it's already happening, right? You're already starting to see this happen. So the opportunity in building stuff and working it right now, and also working on like trying to understand how it works, and that demystification is really preparing us to make really good, better decisions about when these tools are available widespread, so we know how to use them. So I think there's a lot of that. And to me, that's what all these projects are really leading up to right now.
Just a quick answer to Annette with the digitized, the AI and the digitized collection and digital preservation. So with that example I gave before about the 19th century handwriting, as the HTR text has been improved, has been corrected further by our volunteers, we're round tripping those text files back into our digital preservation system, and also keeping the various iterations over time. So they are being digitally preserved. We had a lot of conversations about how we'd make that workflow work for us, and to maintain the history and the record of the corrections on those particular files. So we are definitely thinking about it within our digital preservation space.
Okay, I think we are almost. Oh, there is one more question from Janet. Margaret,
Janet,
do we have any papers?
On our preservation workflow. Before the meeting started, we were just idly chatting, and we're doing a lot of work at State Library at the moment on our digital preservation maturity planning. I certainly could put you, Janet, I could probably put you in touch, or if you could get in touch with me, we can talk offline about how we've done that in terms of our ingesting and re-ingesting into our digital preservation system of those documents. So that I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. That'd be great. And Ingrid, could you help us do that?
Absolutely.
Thanks. I only got in the last 20 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff and Margaret. It's been a very great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everyone enjoyed that. And again, the record of this webinar will be available on YouTube. And I'm gonna pass back to you, Ingrid, for final wrap up.
Oh, that was really good. I just kind of was so focused. I stopped writing and then realized I was supposed to be also checking questions. Thank you so much, Franz, Jeff, and Margaret, for a really great webinar this morning. Lots to think about there. I particularly love the fact that we've ended up in this idea of a feedback loop and the resourcefulness in that, and also the resourcefulness and just simply information sharing and the reward that comes from that. So really appreciate you suggesting this session and giving up your time. So if anyone likes to show their appreciation, we always like to hit the reaction button. There's some links in the chat there for those of you who'd like to come together again on the 30th of April to hear Jeff talk about the AI Ambassadors Program at ACMI, which is a really wonderful program. And I'm sorry you won't be here with us that time, France, but it's helpful for us to know where you've got to with that, because sharing understanding is a critical part of looking at how this disruptive technology actually enables us, or what we have to do to keep it in check. So thanks everyone. We'll get the video up. Wishing you well with the rest of your day, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Cheerio.
Thanks everyone. Thanks Jeff. Thanks
all.
Franz.
Thanks guys.
Bye.
Thanks everyone.